Hello, everyone. This is your host, alexbalgood, and this is Leap of Health. And today we have Brandy Searcy. She is a pharmaceutical research scientist and a health coach. So we're going to be diving into really cool stuff today. We're going to be talking about grains and glyphosate. I know a lot of people has heard about glyphosate all over the internet, but you still probably don't know what it is. So we're going to be talking about that. And before we dive into all that, tell us about how you went from a researcher to a health coach. Tell us a little bit about your journey there.
Where to begin? So with all of it, I think maybe it's a path with many steps. How about that? So way back a long time ago, all the way in the early 2000s, I was actually even before 2000, I was dealing with acne and started making my own skincare in 2008. And then that has kind of just stepwise led to different transitions as I've made my own health journey. So in 2012, I wound up going on a gluten-free diet. And as part of that, learned a ton about gluten, where it's present, where it's not, and also glyphosate. And then kind of more recently, uh, along my own health journey again, decided kind of maybe circa 2021 to go ahead and complete a health coach certification.
Hmm, that's awesome. And let's start with that. Because a lot of people too, I think we don't understand. What are some of those grains that
Yeah.
contain gluten? Because I think we also too, uh, we hear a lot about of these things of like gluten free and this doesn't have gluten, but then we're very confused because there's so many grains out there now that I think we need to kind of like dive a little bit into this for people to understand exactly what we're talking about. What
Yeah.
exactly are those?
And that is such a great question because gluten-free has become such a buzzword and such a marketing ploy. And really I feel like a lot of companies nowadays are using it as a scare tactic to convince you to buy their product because, hey, this coffee is gluten-free. Well, why does coffee even have gluten in it in the first place? The answer is it doesn't. Um, so gluten, the gluten protein, at least the one that we are worried about when we have a gluten sensitivity or when we have celiac disease, comes from wheat, barley, and rye. That is it. Now, does that mean that corn doesn't have gluten? No, because you'll see on an ingredients list a lot of times like corn gluten. That's not the gluten proteins that we're concerned with. At the end of the day, gluten is an entire category of proteins of a certain, there's something about the structure of them that makes them fall into the gluten category, and the ones that cause problems with our immune systems are again barley, wheat, and rye. Now, some crops are cross-contaminated with gluten. The most notorious of these is oats. So oats are either grown alongside of wheat a lot of times, or they are they during the manufacture of the oats, like when the oats are dried and processed and all of this kind of thing, it's done on a line that's also processing flours that contain gluten. And so for that reason, a lot of times people will opt for gluten-free oats.
Hmm. Yeah, because it gets so confusing. I mean,
Mhm.
just what you just said, a lot of these products now make no sense. Because,
Right.
yeah, like why will a coffee set gluten free? Or even with corn too, or rice that says, oh, it's gluten free. Like
Yeah, I
it's been
mean,
gluten free from the beginning. Why are we pointing this out? It's like if you will go, literally go up, buy some apples, and it says on the bottom gluten free on these apples. It kind of like makes no sense. So we need to
yeah.
be really aware when we come up across these products that make no sense when they're saying that, especially when we now understand that only rye, wheat, and barley.
Yeah.
Yay!
Yes. Those three.
They're the only three that actually have the gluten.
Right. Yes. The gluten that we need to be concerned about anyways. Because
Right.
again, corn, even oats have gluten proteins, but they aren't the kind of gluten proteins. There is something specific about the structure of the gluten protein, specific about that sequence of amino acids that makes it so that it is causing problems for certain people within our digestive tract.
Right. And also too, I would like to point out that uh many, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, when people were making bread, like sourdough and things like that, those grains were very differently from what we eat now. Because people might be like, well, my great grandma, my great 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 grandma made bread and I never got sick. Well, they never got sick, and they were strong and they were not overweight and they were healthy because they were eating whatever, right? Potatoes, bread, or whatever they ate 200 years ago. But that is so different from what we eat today. Go ahead.
That is absolutely correct. So there is back in the 1950s. All right. So if we go all the way back, it is still possible to get the very first non-hybridized wheat. It is called einkorn. So it is a type of wheat that has different gluten proteins, like they are structurally different from the proteins in modern day wheat. Around the 1950s, wheat was hybridized, and it was done so in order to solve the world hunger crisis and to meet demands to feed everybody. During that hybridization process, it introduced a whole different set of gluten proteins into wheat that we are eating today. And along with it came celiac disease and a rise. And it's not just celiac. These particular gluten proteins that are in modern day wheat have been linked to worsening of schizophrenia conditions, worsening of lots of different autoimmune and even non-autoimmune diseases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's this kind of like a problem that we have in modern time. It's bigger than we think because a lot of people also think like, well, it's so ridiculous, just eat whatever. Why do you have to be gluten free? Why, are certain people so you know crazy about like, no, like I don't want to eat gluten, or I eat my diet gluten free, or I try to do certain things. And the other people are like, well, come on, don't be ridiculous. Nothing's gonna happen to you. It's just bread. It's just some pancakes. It's just some waffles. Like all these delicious things that makes us very happy. But in reality, and as we said, right, it goes back to the 50s. And this is not in every part of the world. And you can correct me if that's untrue, but there's about 40 countries in the world that have banned generically modified wheat and just any generically modified seeds and ingredients within their countries. And like, let's say, for example, when I go to France, I could eat literally 3 baguettes from the bakery to my Airbnb and not feel sick or bloated or anything once, right? Tell us a little bit about why.
Okay, so there's kind of a lot to it. So part of this is the wheat conversation. Part of this is einkorn wheat, which to my knowledge, not a whole lot of countries are still using einkorn, which again is that very first wheat. The way that wheat, when you hybridize it and when you cross it, because modern day wheat has been crossed with a grass, what happens is the the genome actually expands. So it goes from 16, I believe. It's been a minute since I've looked this up, so I may be off by 8. I believe it was 16 genes that were coded for in einkorn. Most wheat, so when we're talking most ancient wheats, even like spelt, for instance, and durum wheat, which are more popular in Europe, those even are kind of next gen. So they would have twice the number of gene sequences that they're coding for, then modern day wheat is like 4x because it's been hybridized again and again, crossed with that grass. So that's one piece of the conversation. Another piece of it is glyphosate. And I think a third piece to this that we really don't talk about enough is fluoride in the water.
Yes, let's start with fluoride. I've never
Right.
heard of this, but please enlighten us with this.
Okay. So here in America, most cities, most states require that fluoride be added to the water. And what this does within the body is it competes with iodine. Iodine is absolutely essential for the proper functioning of the thyroid. And because fluoride and iodine are both halogens, fluoride binds so much more strongly to anything than iodine does. And so when it binds to these receptors within the body, then it makes it even harder for iodine to get in there. Plus, since we are constantly exposed to fluoride, it's making it even harder for iodine to kind of upseat. And because many of us, quite frankly, are deficient in iodine in our diet. So it's
Mhm.
making it harder even for the thyroid to properly make the thyroid hormones, and healthy production of thyroid hormones are needed in order for healthy digestion. So this kind of goes hand in hand. It's something that, we also don't talk about enough is, okay, we think just because we're in Europe and we're stress-free and we're eating the bread over there and it's not a problem, that it's got to be because of the wheat. And in fact, it could be because of the water. We're not exposed to fluoridated water over there. Our thyroid's able to function properly, able to meet our demands, and our digestion just restores naturally because all of a sudden we've got better stomach acid. We've got, kind of depending on how long we're gone, but like less SIBO, all of those things.
Yeah, there's so many things that there's so many factors with when it comes to like wheat and grain and gluten. And this is fascinating. I've never really thought about the water and the fluoride. And as you said, if our thyroid is not working well, then we can process certain foods just like wheat. Um, wow. So this is incredible. But the more we know, the better we do, right? And let's go ahead and talk about glyphosate because I don't think people also too. They're like, what is this? Is this a chemical? What is this? Is this just on the grains? How this work? How is this damaging my body? How is helping? What is it doing to it?
Yeah, so glyphosate is the active ingredient in Roundup. And the thing that most people don't know is that when we're talking about grains, glyphosate, because you're thinking, why would somebody ever spray Roundup on a grain crop, right? It's going to kill that crop. Well, in fact, glyphosate is sprayed on grains in order to kill them all at the same time, and it also desiccates them, so it dries them out and it makes it easier to harvest. So farmers will go through, spray Roundup on a crop, wait a few days to let the crop die completely. It all dies at the same time. It all dries out at the same time. And then they go through and they cut the head off the grain. It makes it easier to thresh the grain, easier to process the grain. This is happening not just with our grains, but also with sugar, especially cane sugar.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. And yeah, and this is something, and I mean, it's random, right? A lot of people also don't understand that all these chemicals and this pesticides and things that we are putting on our crops, we are eating. It's not just for a purpose of like, it's drying the corn, but yeah, it's drying the corn and it's making the collect of the grains easier and all these process. But we're not understanding that we're eating all these chemicals that stay in our body.
And one thing about this, because this took me a really long time to kind of understand.
Mhm.
Um, Roundup is an herbicide. So, my thought was, it's an herbicide. Why are we freaking out over something that's just going to kill plants? Like, why is it such a big deal? Well, the reason why it is such a big deal is twofold. one of the ways that Roundup works is it interrupts what is known as the shikimate pathway in plants. It interferes with that, and that's why it kills plants. Now, while we humans, as mammals, do not have that pathway, all of those bacteria residing in our gut do. And so glyphosate is totally disrupting the gut microbiome. And let's see, I feel like there was something else I wanted to say about that, and I completely, oh, and then the other thing
Yes.
is just from kind of a global perspective and a health of the world perspective, our use of glyphosate is disrupting the soil microbiome as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I will think so because it's an herbicide that's killing all these things in the plant. It's killing all of our good bio, and the soil also contains all these good bacteria and all these good things to make, you know, the soil stronger. So yeah, I don't think we're all really thinking clear when we're eating all this crap food. And this is, I, I mean, I'm a big on protesting and, making our government to hear our voice. And one of those things is when we talk about genetically modified food and pesticides and all these things that we're doing to our food system, that at one point our soil is going to have zero nutrition value. What are we going to eat? And these are the things that we need to talk about as consumers because
Absolutely.
we are the ones buying all this crap that we're like, oh, it's fine. It's just a loaf of bread. Oh, it's fine. It's just some cupcakes with awful cane sugar and awful grains and glyphosate in it. So I don't think we really are thinking at a large scale of what is really happening to everything, to our soil, to our bodies, to our gut. It's just kind of sad sometimes. I think about it, how we forget that we're part of this whole system, and not just like our body, but our planet. What else is this glyphosate doing to our body? How does this react? How does this look in a person once they've been consuming it for a long time?
So the other thing, glyphosate is a very powerful chelator, and what this means is that it binds metals especially very well. It was originally it was originally introduced into industry as a pipe cleaner, just to give you an idea of like how powerful.
Mind blown right now. Why? Why are we doing this? Continue.
Yes. So what this means is when you ingest it, if you're also eating things that contain iron or copper or magnesium, like any of these minerals that's necessary for our body, that glyphosate is likely going to hang on to it so strongly that it's not going to be taken up by the system. And so our bodies aren't going to get the full nutrient value of the meal that we eat if we're consuming glyphosate in with it.
Mm-hmm. And also too, as you mentioned, these are minerals that we're gonna eat.
Yeah.
We will eat, especially if you're eating a sandwich, you already have the glyphosate, you have the spinach there, you have, if you have some egg, you have all this iodine and like all these other ingredients that will bind to the glyphosate. It's just so crazy, but you know, well, the more we know, the better we do. I always say that. And so too, tell us too, what are some of the things? Now we talk about like where are the grains, which one are the ones that have the gluten, which ones are the ones that have the glyphosate, which are most the grains with gluten. How do we, as a health coach, how do you go about this with your clients? How do we try to get rid of all this crap that we just ate that we didn't know it was in our food in the first place? And now we're like, you know what? I do have gut problems. I'm gassy, I'm this, I'm that. what can we do on those instances? How does it look as a coach? How do you go about this?
Okay, so the very first thing is kind of retraining, because I think a lot of people, have done a good job about moving towards organic when we're talking fresh fruits and vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
But I think most of us aren't thinking, oh, my grains are a primary source of glyphosate in my diet. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's spending some time and talking through that. Okay, we really need to be focusing on eating certified organic grains, certified organic sugar. Uh, if you eat corn at all, be sure it's non-GMO and organic, because most corn is Roundup ready now. So that means that the corn is able to thrive even with Roundup being sprayed on it. So be
Mm-hmm.
either completely eliminating corn or being sure it's non-GMO and organic is important. And then it's really all about just focusing on uh, healthy healthy lifestyle. It comes back down to what you already said, which is we are part of nature. And so living in sync with natural rhythms, when we wake up in the morning, getting out in sunshine, being sure that we're using blue light blockers in the evening so that we support natural cortisol and melatonin rhythms. Um, being sure that we're getting enough iodine every day, being sure we're drinking fluoride free water, all of the
Mm-hmm.
things so that our body really can function as it's made to function.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, just to keep in mind, as you mentioned, try to eat organic and see what your wine has, what the ingredients have, because I think a lot of, especially when you buy packaged food, sometimes it might have a corn or
Mhm.
corn syrup or sugar. Like those are like the main ingredients that a lot of this food has. And I think just being aware of like, look, if you're gonna eat this that is on a package and it has all these grains that you don't even know where they come from, and all this sugar that also you know where it comes from, most likely is gonna have some sort of glyphosate that's gonna stay in your body, and that we already talk about what it's doing to your body. It's binding to all these good minerals that you need, and then it's killing your gut bacteria, and it's not doing a lot of good things for you. So
Right.
I think just keep on informing ourselves of how our food system is and what we can do. It's kind of like the main idea.
Yeah, totally
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah. And so now that we have come to understand, like, okay, we're moving to eating more organic fruits and veggies. Now we're kind of like staying away from gluten, or we're doing grains that are organically grown. What is the next step? Because I know glyphosate doesn't just leave your body because you're eating well.
It
Yeah.
actually, so this is where I differ from mainstream, because I think, I mean, yes, I've heard that there are reports that glyphosate stays in it. If you follow Stephanie Seneff's work, she actually claims that it gets intercalated into protein, which I cannot for the life of me figure out. And I've even got like little proteins, little amino
Yes.
acids that I made to like demonstrate this. Like
Yes.
there's
Yes.
no
Yes.
way it's getting intercalated into protein. Um, it's actually getting broken down into the phosphate and the sarcosine, which is naturally occurring in the body anyways, and then eliminated from the body. So to me, the glyphosate is most problematic when it's still in the glyphosate form, and just for that reason, because it is killing the healthy gut bacteria and chelating two minerals, so they're not getting released into the body, or getting uptaken and moved to tissues where they're needed.
Mm-hmm. Is it glyphosate, some sort of like a plastic derivative or not? Because I heard or read that one, so I wasn't sure. I
That
know.
it's a No, it's actually it's really similar in structure to the amino acid. So I'll just show you. So if you can see this, this is the amino acid glycine in,
Mm-hmm.
and then this is glyphosate. So the difference between the two is glyphosate has this extra carbon and a phosphate group on the end of it.
Yes. And for
And
everyone that it's listening, she's just showing us a little 3D diagram of how the actual I guess structure of the molecules, right? How
yeah,
they actually look like.
yeah. And in the body is very adept. And I apologize for my let me see if I
No
can
worries.
fix that.
Okay. So anyhow, um she was showing us the actual 3D molecules and how they work and how they have like this extra, you said carbon and
Yeah, phosphate compared with like a glycine amino acid.
so do you think glyphosate we naturally get rid of it or how do
Yeah,
we do that?
yeah. So the body is very good about removing phosphate groups. And what you
Mm-hmm.
have left is this molecule known as sarcosine. And this is naturally occurring in the body anyways. It is kind of a breakdown product of, sorry, got these rotated, a breakdown product of glycine. It's basically glycine with an extra carbon hanging off the nitrogen um,
Mm-hmm.
molecule. But anyways, because this carbon is hanging off the nitrogen molecule, so this blue here is nitrogen, it is not able to be taken up and incorporated as an amino acid because amino acids are kind of built, um, they kind of rely on nothing being here. They kind
Mm-hmm.
of rely on that shape in order to build. So yeah, this would be naturally eliminated from the body, the sarcosine plus then the leftover phosphate group.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't buy into that. Like I cannot understand
Is
how
this
she
is
arrives
this
at that.
is this lady's work? Is she a scientist? I've never heard of her, so I'm not sure.
She she holds a PhD in computer science at MIT.
Oh,
And she wrote a
okay.
book called Toxic Legacy, where she goes through 5 claims on why glyphosate is so detrimental to human health.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the thing is, I agree with several of her points. But to me, this one especially is sensationalized and doesn't hold water.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, you are researchers and a scientist. She's not. So I think you come from a different background of understanding certain things in different ways than her. So, from what you just show us, it kind of like makes a little bit of sense, at least to me. So yeah. So how do you understand or how do you go about with your clients to get rid of glyphosate?
Well, I mean, I don't really worry about, trying to test it or find it in the body. I think basically when we give our body what it needs,
Mm-hmm.
nature takes care of the rest. And so just by avoiding exposure to it as much as possible, and I know there's, I feel like there's also a lot of fear mongering in this particular aspect of, oh, even if you've been on a glyphosate free diet for 50 years, you still have glyphosate in your system. Like there's all kinds of crazy claims about that. And it's like, okay, so you might still have some carbon somewhere in your body, like if they carbon label it or something that's still from glyphosate that you were exposed to somehow, but like how are they, the question is always how are they testing that, how are they confirming that, like are they actually finding the glyphosate molecule in the body, or are they just finding some carbon that they labeled, or what exactly is it? But at the end of the day, we also kind of all live in this world and we can only worry about so much. And I think we worry about the things that we can control and let go of the rest, and with that, we reduce stress a lot. And that also creates that shifts us back into the parasympathetic state so that the body is able to just kind of take over and do its thing. And you give it as healthy an environment as possible. And like I say, just let go of the rest.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm not a scientist or, a researcher or anything like that, but I feel like within myself, the more you do these little steps or change lifestyles and to better your health, I think you just start feeling better. And our
Hmm.
body is so smart. I mean, we have the lymphatic system, you have the skin, we have the sweat. We are almost, or we are probably the most perfect machine in the planet, where we give it all this crap all the time for years. And then suddenly we get enlightened and be like, oh, maybe I should take care of myself. Your body will respond to it.
Hmm. Absolutely.
And we have also too, I think too, the tools, we have a lot of herbs, we have a lot of things that we can implement, as you mentioned, breathing techniques, a lot of different things that we can help for certain toxins to get out of our system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and I mean, I think all of those are I think anything to support because so many of us live in this constant fight or flight. So anything that we can do to, drop into that rest and digest state is just going to help the body repair.
yeah, I think I was reading too an article where it says that we're exposed so much to plastic, but our body can't get, like, it's able to get rid of that too, like certain plastic molecules that we like either drink or eat, or because everything is pretty much in plastic. We wear plastic.
Yeah, exactly.
And so our body is actually able to get rid of that. I think it's at like 48 hours or something, 2 to 3 days or something. The body, after being exposed to certain plastic molecules, it's able to get rid of them. So I feel like our body, it's so amazing, and it gives me hope that I know we live in such a toxic world, but our body still's like the perfect machine that will still fight for us if we actually give it the help and the tools to continue getting healthier. Because also too, yeah, we have the perfect body. It's not gonna get healthier by itself.
Well, and I think as part of that is we yes, your body naturally detoxes, but in a day and age where we are exposed to so many toxins, we definitely need to be conscientious of how much toxins we're adding to its daily load. And I think this is where, doing our best to minimize and then just, not stressing about the things we can't control, definitely just helps.
hmm Going back a little bit about the grains, what are some of the things that you, or tips that you might give to beginners that are like, I just find out about this glyphosate thing and about this grain thing. I've been eating bread my whole life. I didn't know I
Well,
was putting all these things in my body. What are some of the little things or tips that you might give them to start easing it off and don't go super stressed about it, step by step?
all right. So I think the biggest one, if you've been eating bread and you have no symptoms from it, like why stop?
Mm,
I
okay.
mean, if it's it honestly, gluten doesn't cause problems in everyone or every single person in America anyway would be, we'd all be suffering, I think, a lot more than a lot of people are suffering. So if you don't have a problem with gluten, I don't necessarily think it's necessary to stop. I think the number one thing for anybody is moving to certified organic grains and sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are in a boat where you're having symptoms, and these can be the thing with gluten sensitivity, it can be real, it may not even show up on a food sensitivity test, or you may be like, why would I even take a food sensitivity test? And you don't have to. Like if you're having weird, especially aches and pains in joints, so
Mm-hmm.
joint pain, if you're finding that your flexibility is kind of severely diminished, if you're having weird headaches, fatigue, things like this. I know with me back in 2012, ultimately it wasn't gluten, but it was Lyme disease. And because of that, I have not been able to eat gluten since.
Mm.
As part of that, as just part of trying to figure out what was going on, I went on a gluten-free diet, and it started out 30 days just seeing whether symptoms improved, and it helped to some extent. It didn't completely resolve everything for me. I was having severe anxiety at the time, joint pain, um, fatigue. So all three of those, the thing that it helped most with for me was anxiety. And believe it or not, like what triggered me worse than bread was microbrews.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Did you just eliminate everything pretty much to make you feel better?
Yeah. So it was don't drink beer.
Well, they have a
um,
lot of, they make with grain, so yeah.
yeah. Don't drink beer, don't eat barley, or don't eat barley, wheat, and rye. And yeah, Um, but I mean, beer, it was to the extent where even a sip of microbrew and like 24 hours later, I would be having crazy anxiety problems.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. And you know what? Like a lot of people, I feel like they suffer from these like anxiety things, and they don't understand that a lot of these things is because of the food they're eating.
Hmm.
Whether it's like the big amounts that they're eating with gluten and all these carbs and the amount of sugar too that can trigger these things. I mean, beer has a lot of calories too.
Yeah, yeah, it does. Um, but definitely like it's easy. I mean, I know sounding like giving up bread sounds like one of the hardest things on the planet. I thought so too back before I did it, but it was kind of amazing how easy it was. And when you say, okay, let me do this for 30 days. And I mean, there are even some people out there who would say, do it for 21 days. I think 30, but if 21 sounds like an easier goal, do it for 21 days. That's 3 weeks, and then take it day by day, and it's a lot easier. Like
Hmm.
it- that is such a kind of small amount of time in the grand scheme of things. And the thing is, when you start feeling better, then you're like, oh, this is so worth it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, like just start small. I think that's one of my things, at least for me. I like to, especially with things like this, right? Like with bread. I love bread. I'm obsessed about bread. Like bread, it's so good, right? So if people don't care about bread, I love bread. And I did that too. Especially when I was like eating it a lot and I was not eating organic or anything. And it really also messed up my gut. So the little steps that you will do, don't think about maybe 21 or 30 days, but think about like this week or
Yeah.
this weekend. Let's try it. And if you feel good, but just kind of like avoiding it, and the more the as you said, the better you feel, the
Mhm.
more you're gonna do it because you're like, oh, look at this. I was actually feeling really good and I didn't really miss it. And also, you might just become lighter too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just amazing. But it's I think just the more we know. I think we do get a little bit crazy and obsessed because of social media or everything that we listen here and there and see and articles and all these things. But I think it's just like knowledge is definitely power, and the more
Mhm.
we know, the better we can do. I know glyphosate is one of those heavy topics that people are like, I don't want to know about it because like now I'm gonna be like all scared of eating these or eating that. But I think it just empowers you to just take better decisions. And as I said, we are the ones that control the market. We are the people that stays like, you know what, we're gonna eat more organic. The more if more people in this country will eat organic, the companies will make more organics products. But if we are buying all these cheap products that are non-organic and they have all these crazy sugars and this crazy glyphosate and grains and all these things, uh, you know, then the market will always be a little bit up. So you have the power to control a lot of these things if you really think about it. So, you know, be the one to make that change, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, this conversation has been amazing. I just learned so much. Is there anything else that you would like to tell us before we leave about the grains, glyphosate, anything, any tips, anything?
So I've actually, because this is a topic near and dear to my heart, so I've written several articles and actually talked about glyphosate before. And so I'm happy to provide you the links to that. If your listeners want to dive into this topic more, either on the glyphosate aspect or on ancient wheat, because this is something else that I talk about
Yes, yes.
on my blog.
I would love all those links. And for everybody that it's want to get those articles and stuff, I will put all that in the show notes. And if they want to connect with you and they're like, you're a health coach, I want you to kind of like guide me through this, where can they find you?
Feel better than fine.
Oh, yes, that was easy. Well, I will put also your website on the show notes for everybody to connect with you. And, if they have more questions, they can get in contact with you. For
All right.
anybody else, if you like to know any more about my podcast or the show, you can find me on alexbalgood.com. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. Also, don't forget, you can still buy my book. It's on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles. It's called Parents Are Greatest Teachers. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you for sharing all this with us. I think, as I said, the more we know, the better. If you want to eat better food, let your senators, let anybody in your close government, let them know, like, hey, you know what, I don't want, like I said, I don't want fluoride in my water. We are the ones that can change this country that way. And so the more we do to better our soil or water or air quality by telling our government officials this, the better it is. So there you go. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I love these conversations. Thank you for the information, everybody. And, have an amazing day. And think about it. Think about that you can always be the change and you can be the hero in every story. Thank you, everyone. Have an amazing day.